Hey there guys, and welcome back. This is the video for my ChatGPT downloader extension. In the first half we'll be going over a little bit of background followed by how exactly the extension works. And in the second half, normally I would do code review. We'd actually go through the code I wrote so you understood how it works. But I think in this situation, instead I'm going to go over generalities on how the page is put together, how this page that you're staring at, ChatGPT's interface, is put together, and what needs to happen in order to parse the code, and then maybe some little specifics about the code base itself. But beyond that, we're not going to go too deep in this video, so feel free to stick around for the second half, even if you're normally just here to get the extension. So a little over a week ago, my friend asked me if I was using ChatGPT, and I told him, when it first launched, I had heard about it, I tried getting on, I got put on an email wait list to actually be able to use the thing. And at that point, I had basically lost interest. I've watched a few videos on exactly how it works, the neural networks behind it and whatnot, and I was kind of content with that. I understood that it was cool and that everybody liked it, but I didn't feel a particular need to hop on it. Now, if you follow this channel, you'll know that over on Lightlike, maybe 6 or 8 months ago, I had started the project, and I was talking at the time about using maybe Google Lambda or GPT-2 to actually generate text for the game, to generate the random encounter text and whatnot. So the fact of the matter is that eventually I was going to come over here and see how well it did at that kind of stuff. But we're here now. Now that my friend prompted me and said that he'd been using it, I decided to take a look, and that has led us to this conversation that you see here. So very simply, I just kind of started poking around with it. I had heard some things. So for example, you can see me referencing prior to 2022, because I had heard that it was trained on content prior to 2022 and therefore didn't know. I figured I'd ask anyway. So there's a couple things here that I was asking just to see whether or not it would give me the information that I expected. And then as we scroll down here, you can see actually some more interesting stuff like what is my username. And this I was pretty sure it was running server side, but I wasn't too sure if there wasn't a client side component as well. Maybe not the full model, obviously, but maybe some parts of it that ran. So I was curious whether or not to tell me that. And then we can see some interesting stuff down here where I realized that it could start formatting text. So I actually started testing that and getting it to give me various formats, trying to actually get it to nest the number formatted text. It didn't really do that. However, it did do the bullet points just fine. And then we started talking about markdown here. And there's some pretty interesting things in here that I noticed. So for example, over here, you can see it actually has code markdown and whatnot available. And the nesting on the conversations just keep on going. So that is a lot to process, and that played heavily into how exactly this extension works. So with that background out of the way, let's take a look. So over here on the GitHub, as you can see, this is adamantlife/ChatGPT downloader. This is where you can go ahead and get the code. We also have a releases page. I've got the CRX here. However, I have noticed I tried downloading it at work just to see what would happen. Work blocked it. So one of those things, you can always come to this page and download this. You shouldn't get blocked downloading the zip file unless you're on a super strict network. But if you got the zip file, then you just head over to your extensions page, and then you can go ahead and load an unpacked extension. So if we pop this open, you can see here in the file dialog, this would be the zip file after it's got extracted. And right here, this is the extension itself. This is the subfolder right here. So you just select this one and hit select folder, and it would be loaded in. Back over here on the chat page, in the top right hand corner, this is what you'll see once you have the extension loaded. We'll click this button and we get a variety of download/save buttons. So very simply, these two on the left, the ones that say display thread, that is exactly what you have loaded on the screen right now. The download all threads or save all threads would be this stuff right here where, let me get to it, we have different threads of the chat right here. And this happens when you edit the question. So when you edit the question, instead of replacing the responses that ChatGPT already had, it actually creates a whole new conversation thread. So the second option will actually come through and navigate through all these different options right here, all these nested threads that you can have in a conversation, and get all that stuff. And then between download and save, download is going to create a download file. It's going to be a JSON formatted file. And I will go ahead and show you that JSON formatted file in just a moment. But while we're still here, the save displayed thread or save all threads, those will actually get saved to your browser itself. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the download all threads button right here. You can see a bunch of stuff just happened on the screen right there. We got a thing saying that chat log was downloaded. And up here in my downloads, you can see that popped up. We'll click off there. I'll hit the save all threads button. Same thing kind of happens. And that's happening again because it's actually iterating through all the threads in order to get them. And we got another message saying that it was saved. So now that we have that done, let's go ahead and look at the JSON file first. And then we'll go ahead and look at the next feature available on this extension. So this is the JSON file you will get. I did change it a little bit here just because I had some personal information on here, but you'll have the GUID up here, which is the global unique identifier, in other words, and that is the string that happens at the end of the URL that identifies which chat you're in. So when you look at the URL over on ChatGPT, you'll notice when it says chat / whatever that is following it identifies which conversation you're in. So that will get saved. This is the timestamp for when it was saved, the title that it had at the time. And then down here, these are usernames, okay? But the way ChatGPT works right now is it only uses the email address. It doesn't actually use the person's username. So this will be your email address. And as we scroll through here, this chatters object right here, this key inside of the JSON, this holds information about the people involved in the conversation. Right now, it's only you and ChatGPT, but in the future, if that changes, this will be able to update at that point. It's currently future-proofed, so it shouldn't break if more people get added to the conversation. We have your original icon HTML. I wanted to include the original HTML elements from the page so that you can put stuff back together. So this will be the original HTML icon for you. And then this right here is actually the encoding of your image, your icon image. So you don't actually need the internet connection to have your icon. And same thing down here for ChatGPT. This is its SVG element, its original icon. And likewise, that is that encoded so that you don't actually need to generate it. This can be put into any object. For example, an image, you can set it as the source and it will work just fine. So that is useful. Now, the rest of this, it may look a little bit silly, but I think it makes sense in the long run. So you'll see I have chatter lines here. And basically, we're going to have lists, arrays, I should say, of lines, of chat lines. And this chatter lines up here, this is the user speaking each and every time. So this will get mapped to chatters, okay? And again, right now, ChatGPT is very simple. So it's just always going to be you, ChatGPT, repeated over and over and over again. However, for the download all threads option, as you can see here, we have subarrays. So this, for example, is the first time I asked that question. I had a question and then I asked a follow-up question, right? So that's 2 lines right here. And then I edited the question. So that's the edited question. And then inside of that, I had 3 different edits to the following question just so I could see what GPT was doing. Again, I was playing with it. And each of these lines get mapped directly to either dialogue. Dialogue has, again, the exact elements taken from the page so that you can stitch it back together. Or all the way down here, strip dialogue, which is just the text. It just pulled the text out. And this is not always useful, especially when we get down into situations like this where it had formatted text. So this is where it was showing me how it would format markdown text. So that is not going to be very easy to read in this situation. However, if you have a very simple conversation with ChatGPT, it may be better for you to have just the text pulled out and just use that transcript as is. And that is the entirety of the JSON file. So now that we have the format understood, we'll go ahead and hop over into the extension options page, which gives us a little bit more functionality. All right, so 2 ways of getting there. One, you can either click the details here and click the extension options there, or easier yet is go up to the toolbar up here and click on the icon. If you click on the icon, that will take you over to the extensions page. That's the easiest way to get there. And this is the extensions options page. So as you can see, this is the one that I saved. So this was when I clicked the save button. We have the title here, the date time that it got saved at. And we also have a download button. If in case you want to download that JSON again, you can download it directly from the extensions storage as opposed to going back to ChatGPT, which means that you can download it while offline. And obviously a trash can, so you can delete it right off this page. If we click on this, as you can see, it renders it very close to how it was over on ChatGPT. There are minor differences here and there, but otherwise, because it's using the same exact elements and I took the CSS from ChatGPT's page, everything should look more or less the same. Again, minor differences here and there. For example, there's no banding, so there's not dark background and then light background for myself, etc, etc, etc. But beyond that, everything is going to look very similar, including if we come to, where is it? Here we go. Threads. So as you can see, we still have threads here, so I'll click that. Here's my next thread, and down here, I still have all 3 threads right here, and I can come through them. Again, all of this is available offline because it's saved to your browser, so you can always access this. And if we look up here, this will just take us back to the front page, easy enough. And over here on the right-hand side, this one's useful because this will actually let you save this as a PDF if you want to do it that way. So I'm going to go up here and click this. And as you can see, here's my print dialog. So I could print it out on paper, but who does that? Instead, I've got save as PDF because I don't actually have a printer on this computer. So I can save this to a PDF file and download it that way. Everything, as you can see, looks normal as far as I can tell. I did not notice anywhere that is particularly off. When you do print, in order to save ink, the printing dialog is set up to strip out background color. So for example, let's see. And I actually had to switch threads in order to show this because I forgot one thing to mention is printing will only print out the current thread. So this will not let you save PDFs of all the threads all at once because that can get a little bit sketchy on how exactly it would lay out all the information on the print format. Since it is not dynamic, obviously, on ChatGPT and on this extensions page, you can dynamically change which thread you're in. I do not have this set up to format a logical way of aligning all the threads at once for a printout. So, point being, however, is that as you can see right here, this is the code block right here. And as I was saying, it does not print out background color, and therefore this is not black right here. You do not have your black box right here. So again, there are little differences there, but it is still useful for 99% of the situations in which you would like to have a PDF instead of having to be online and looking at ChatGPT's website. And just to demonstrate why this is important, we'll go ahead and right click and print right here. And as you can see, this is what you get. If you try printing from ChatGPT's website, you only get what is visible on the screen, as opposed to printing from the extension gives you everything. And that would be all the features available here in the extension. So go ahead and just delete that for right now, just to prove the delete button works. So if you have any other suggestions or questions about the extension, by all means leave a comment. If you run into issues, post the issues on the GitHub instead. Those are easier to take care of on the GitHub itself. Beyond that, we will now go ahead and go into part 2, which again, instead of looking at the background code itself, we'll look at some of the generalities on how everything is set up, just to give you an idea of what we're working with here. Alright, so when you download or fork off of GitHub, this is what you get. This is all the files right here. Again, the extension is in this folder right here. The rest of this is just GitHub stuff, and that is images for the README, so you can ignore all that stuff. Over here, the file that you are going to be most interested in if you want to do anything with this, if you want to build off this, it is probably going to be ChatGPT. I put this in a separate file so that you can fork it easily, so that you can download it and include it in anything you're working with easily. This does not include all the download functions or all the extension specific UI implementations. That stuff is either over here or in the options files. So this is just information, just functions for parsing ChatGPT's website. Now, first thing to mention as we scroll through here is you'll notice that I broke it up into sections, and you'll also notice that I have a heck ton of notes and descriptions here. So that is on purpose. I figured it would be most useful for most people to actually have good documentation on how the website is working right now. And let me accentuate that. In the future, this may break. One of those things, ChatGPT is technically in a testing phase right now, and the UI on the website may change in the future. This stuff may no longer be valid. For all I know, next month. For all I know, 6 months from now. I don't know when, but eventually, probably. So this information may be out of date. However, it is, I think, a good starting point, at least for the time being. Now, first thing to note about the page is that everything is dynamically loaded, which is why I have this is loaded function up here, because the chat titles, what the title of each conversation is, does not actually load before or after. It loads whenever, basically. So you could actually have the entire conversation up on the page, and then the chat title will get loaded in on the sidebar after that, or vice versa. And there's a couple other things there. For example, rendering response. ChatGPT might be updating itself. It might be typing out its response to your most recent query. So is rendering response is a useful function for checking for that, because you may not want to save or interact with the HTML until after it's done doing that. The GUID, whatever the heck you want to call it, that is basically just coming from the URL at this point. I have not been able to locate it anywhere in the global variables on the website, which is a problem, because threads on the website are dynamically loaded as you traverse between them, by which I mean there is actually no elements hidden on the back end. So if you want the whole conversation, you actually have to click on the arrow for each thread and load each thread incrementally, which is important when we get down to here. So on that topic, the thread and fork functions, you'll notice that I have this thread transition constant right here. This is just a short timeout to give the page a second to load itself after you've clicked on an arrow to load a new thread. Again, I would prefer not to have this. This is actually kind of annoying. I prefer to be able to get the whole entire conversation from a variable somewhere on the website, but I have not been able to track that down. I tried using my etcetera function, which just basically goes through every single last window variable and tries to recursively search all its keys for what you're looking for, and I have not been able to track it down that way. I went ahead and physically, manually picked through Windows variables, just constantly clicking on keys and arrays and whatnot, trying to find where it is keeping the conversation information, because again, the conversation information is not actually on the page for other threads, which means that it's got to be saved somewhere. Unfortunately, I have not been able to locate that just yet. So in the meantime, we have to actually let ChatGPT load that for us and wait for it to do so. So for that reason, that's why this exists. If you do find where it is saving all that chat information, where it's saving the conversation threads in the window global variables, let me know, because that is way more useful than doing it this way. But what that does mean is that some of these functions down here, when we're dealing with threads, have to be async. So keep that in mind. You may need to be writing async code in order to work with this, because it has this timeout and has to wait for the timeout to fire. Aside from that, I'm going to go ahead and just really quickly summarize this, because this is probably what you're most interested in right here, which is the conversation itself. As you can see, chat log functions. So basically, we have this next element, and then it has a whole bunch of divs inside of it, plus a spacing div at the bottom. Okay, the spacing div at the bottom is stupid. We don't need to worry about that, so we'll skip it. If you're going to iterate through it, you're going to skip it. Otherwise, each of those divs is a line in the conversation. It is one of those lines that either has your icon or ChatGPT's icon, as well as the text for it. Next up, inside of its child text-based div, so this is down a level, okay? It's going to have two other divs, and that is going to be the item's end, which is the icon, and inside of the icon, it's going to have both, well, it's going to have up to three things. The first thing it's going to have is actually going to have its own spacing div for displaying the icon, So the icon is positioned relatively, which means that it's outside of the flow of the document, and therefore to save space for it on the screen, it has a div saving that space. You don't necessarily need that, and oftentimes the icon inside of that is actually a dummy icon, so it's better off not to touch that one. Instead, you're going to want the next element in line after the div, which is either an image for your icon or a div containing the SVG for ChatGPT's icon. So that's the one you're going to want to look for if you want the icon information. And then the potentially third element that is going to be a child to that div, the items end div, is going to be the thread navigation arrows. And again, that's nested a bit down, but those three things will be inside of the items end div. The next div, as you might suspect, and again, this is going to be down a couple layers. It's going to be a few divs down. More information, again, more specifics are here in case you need it, but that is going to be where you find the element that contains the text. Now, for users, that is always a paragraph and it's escape text. So when you were looking at my example conversation, I tried injecting HTML, I tried injecting different stuff into it, and it just escaped it all. So for users, it's always going to be a string that is inside a paragraph, but for ChatGPT, it's actually going to be a series of HTML elements in order to format its own text. So while you can't format your own text, ChatGPT can. So the contents inside of ChatGPT actually will need to be parsed separately as opposed to the user. The user, you can just snag the text content, but for ChatGPT, you're going to need to figure out what exactly it is displaying and handle it appropriately. And because I wanted to leave this video accessible to everybody, that is where I'm going to leave the explanations. I think that gives you a foothold into how to scrape ChatGPT if you're interested. And as I said before, this is all heavily documented, so it should be easy enough to read through here if you have additional questions and get more of the specifics. Again, this is not going to be an episode where I run through all the functions and just read verbatim what it says each line, explain what each line does, because I don't think that's really necessary in this case. I think I've equipped you with everything you need, and like I said, out of all this stuff, if you're interested in doing something on your own, if you're just interested in extending this project, this is the only file you really need, chatgpt.js right here. Everything else is fluff for the extension. So by all means, take it, run with it, create with it. Attribution is nice, I would appreciate it, but one of those things, I don't got lawyers or anything like that, so I won't be hunting you down. And with all that being said, as always guys, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great and wonderful day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're at in the world, and I will catch you next time.